And welcome once again to your show, Líderes del Futuro. My name is Rafael Vasquez, and this is going to be a brief introduction to Advance Parole for DACA recipients. Again, this is only for people who already have DACA and who would like to live in the United States on a temporary basis. So I will briefly go over some of the requirements, who can apply, who should apply, what is an additional benefit of doing this, and who absolutely should not apply for this benefit. Again, you can always check out my podcast, which is available, Líderes del Futuro, on Spotify, Google Play, iTunes. Obviously, my channel in YouTube is Líderes del Futuro. And I have an Instagram account, Líderes_del_Futuro with double O at the end. And my website, líderesdelfuturo.org. And so let's get started with this information. What is Advance Parole? Advance Parole is one of the benefits for a lot of individuals, but again, we are focusing on DACA. So it allows individuals with DACA to travel outside the United States legally and come back. Some of the reasons to apply for this benefit of Advance Parole is humanitarian related. That means that maybe your mom or your dad are sick, extremely ill, maybe suffering from a serious chronic illness. Maybe they have cancer, maybe they had a sudden illness, and you need to go and say goodbye, or you need to go and be with them on a temporary basis. And so this is the humanitarian reason. And so as a result of that, again, I'll talk about the documentation that you may need, but that is one of the ways. It could be your mom, your dad, your grandma, or your grandpa. This typically cannot be extended to maybe an uncle or an aunt. And again, I'll talk about the documentation. And then maybe you need advance parole because it's job related. That means that maybe you work for a large company and you are required to travel to Mexico, China, some other country. So this one is not necessarily limited to where that family member is. This one, you can, if you need to go to France for a month to open a new store or to oversee some changes at the company you work for, maybe at the bank you work for, you can get this. I had a student once before who needed to travel to Mexico because he was working for a large company that I will not advertise here, but they were opening a brand new store. We're talking about mega stores, and he was going to oversee the whole process. So he was able to do this through Advance Parole, and he was able to leave for 2 months and then come back. And then you can also apply for educational purposes, which means study abroad is one of them. So for example, if you're at a college or university and maybe you need to go for 1 semester to Italy, France, maybe Spain, maybe Chile, maybe Mexico, maybe China, you can ask for this and you should be able to participate in this. The other student that I didn't work with, but I'm aware of, was a student who was working on her PhD, and she needed to travel to another country multiple times. And so she did an advance parole application that said that she was applying because she needed to go out of the country, interview people, come back, then go back out and do the same thing multiple times. And so that's also a reason that you can do it. An additional benefit for doing advance parole that people are not aware of is if you came to the country and you did not obtain DACA prior to the age of 18, and again, I'm not an attorney, I'm not pretending to be an attorney, this is all information that comes from attorneys I have the privilege to work with who are immigration attorneys. But the rule is if you didn't get your DACA and you came as an undocumented as a child, and you didn't get DACA maybe until the age of 20, well, you now have accumulated time as an undocumented immigrant, as an adult in the United States. Anything below the age of 18, the government doesn't care, but it's once you turn 18. And so because of that reason, if you were to marry a US citizen, typically you would have to possibly leave the United States for up to a period of 10 years. It could be anything from 1 day to 10 years. And as a result of that, if you're maybe in a marriage and you're thinking about applying for legal status, to change your legal status to a resident, because you're married to a US citizen, by going out with advance parole, when you come back, you have legally established that you enter the country legally. And as a result of that, when you actually fix your status, you do not have to leave the country for that period of time because you now have entered the country legally. That is something that a lot of people are not aware of, and it's just an extra benefit. So maybe you're not in that type of relationship now, but maybe you do need to leave the country because your mom or your dad or your grandma are seriously ill. When you come back, you have established legal entry. And so if in the future you are in that situation, please keep that in mind and maintain all your records, especially the piece of paper when you come back that is stamped by an immigration officer that they give you that says when you enter the United States legally. And then who shouldn't apply for advance parole? Individuals who, again, have been convicted of a crime, are being accused of a crime, or are in the process of being deported at this moment. And so, again, this is where I always stop and remind you all that even though I'm in California, I'm in Northern California, whatever this is going to be watched or listened to, but if you are even in states where it is legal now to smoke marijuana and have marijuana in your possession, remember that federally is still illegal, and therefore you should never have that in your possession. You should never be in a vehicle or in a home where somebody has marijuana in their possession, because that, under the current provisions of immigration, can prevent you from getting legal status in the future, as well as it could be grounds for dismissal from the United States, and you will definitely lose your DACA if you're arrested, and again, you can get deported. Again, the same thing, you have to make sure that you don't even get accused of child abuse, of domestic violence, of sex crimes, gang affiliation, again, marijuana possession or other drugs. Again, all of those are grounds to later not get legal status, but possibly to get kicked out of the United States. So again, that includes if you have an account online and you have friends. For now, let's use Facebook as an example, although a lot of people don't use Facebook anymore. But let's say you have a Facebook account and you have 300 friends and you don't even talk to those people. But if later on there's a picture of somebody in your Facebook account as a friend in your Facebook account that has marijuana or pictures of gang affiliation or any of that stuff, immigration can use that against you. So I always want to be cautious about that. So here's me saying, if you have a medical marijuana card and you had to submit your thumbprint, you should really speak with a lawyer about whether or not to even apply for DACA renewal, because oftentimes if they find out that you have this medical marijuana card, you can get deported from the United States as a result of applying for DACA renewal. And again, this information comes directly from immigration attorneys I work with or collaborate with, more is what the appropriate word should be. So again, that is something that please keep that in mind. If you're in a situation where you're being arrested for a DUI or any of the other items that I mentioned previously, you should definitely talk with an attorney before trying to do advance parole. And in regards to documentation necessary, the form that you're going to need is the one, a sample that you see is the I-131, which is application for travel document. And that is going to be combined with the G-1145. These two forms can be found in the USCIS website. And as you can always tell, the expiration, always look at when does the form expires. It's typically on the right side. And again, that's important. If you fill out an expired form, maybe you have an old version of it, they will just reject it and then you'll have to start from scratch. After filling out those two applications, you also have to submit a copy of your work permit for DACA, so both sides of the work permit, a copy of the 821D letter of approval, the latest one that has the same dates of expiration as the work permit, because that tells the government that you're legally in the United States. The work permit is just so that you can legally work, but the 821D is the actual DACA. approval. And then you have to write a letter explaining your need to travel. Now, going through the humanitarian piece, if maybe mom or grandma, let's say, are sick in another country, you need to get a letter from a doctor that comes in letterhead, even if it is in another language, that is going to say what the illness is, that the doctor has a license, what is their license number, what hospital do they work at, all of that information. And then again, they have to be very specific about the illness. If they say something minimal, immigration will reject it or will ask for additional documentation. There was one case a few years ago where an individual got a letter and they were saying that the person was suffering from some illness. Immigration requested copies of the x-rays because the letters seem a little bit unbelievable. And so that's something for you to keep in mind. And then you have to write a letter explaining again the reason why, even though that letter that comes from another country, even if it is in another language, one, that letter has to be translated. You can do your own translation if you're going to do this paperwork yourself, or you can go to somebody who can assist you. Also, you have to do your own letter saying, this is my mom, she's sick, I need to go and be with my mom for a certain period of time. Be as specific as you will have to be specific in the form, how many days you plan to be outside the United States. And again, I usually don't recommend for humanitarian reasons that it be for more than 90 days, just to be clear. And then again, the other piece here that is super important is if it is your mom that is sick, then usually you have to get a copy of the birth certificate of your mom that proves who she is, all of that information. And then you're going to do your own birth certificate and a copy of that to prove basically that this is your mom. Those have to be translated as well. You can do your own translation, but that is where you prove the connection. That way, when you say, my mom is sick, well, who's your mom? Well, in my birth certificate, it says my mom is, let's say, Rosalia, and then you prove it by having a copy of her birth certificate. So start gathering that information. Typically, they will ask for 2 pictures, US passport size. At this moment, I am not 100% sure that they will force you to have them due to the pandemic, which makes it harder to obtain those pictures. But if you can get them, that would be best. And then a check or money order, based on the website, it shows that it is for $575. Again, you should be able to do your own application. At some point in the near future, I'm thinking about doing an actual video on how to fill out those 2 forms. The 1145G is very, very simple, but the I-131 will change depending whether or not you're going to do which application you're going to do. And so that is important. And again, this is only intended to be a brief introduction so that you can gather your documentation. Because it's with immigration, if you don't feel like you should be doing it yourself, please reach out to somebody that you can trust, whether it is an immigration attorney you worked with before or somebody who has done this. Now, it's very important that you call and you ask this question, and that is, what is your experience in working with advance parole documentation? And if they say, oh, well, I've done a few, you might consider going with somebody else. You don't want to be with somebody who's learning by doing your paperwork and risking that situation, okay? So that's really, really important for me that I mentioned this. Because in the past, we've had some cases where people go with somebody else and then the paperwork ends up with us because immigration rejected it, and then we find that this box wasn't checked or the signature wasn't done, those type of issues. And with that, again, I want to remind you that this is your show, Líderes del Futuro. I apologize, it should say Futuro at the end there. And again, my name is Rafael Vasquez Guzman. My website, lideresdelfuturo.org. And as I mentioned previously, my Instagram account is líderes_del_futuro. And I welcome any feedback there. You can always message me on my Instagram, or you can always, again, follow me there as I post videos, audios, and a lot of information in regards to immigration. Thank you for your time.